After 2+ years, there are no more excuses. You have to know how to nail a virtual meeting. Reading body language across the screen can be difficult, but about 55% of communication happens through body language. Listen to this quick snippet as Dan and I share techniques to help you maximize the virtual experience for your prospects and clients.
You have to understand that your prospect is human. And so when they get on that Zoom call with you, there are innate human tendencies that are going to kick in for your prospect. So the first human tendency is going to be, is this interaction with you going to harm or help them? They're trying to figure that out. So anthropologists hypothesized tens of thousands of years ago that we as human beings, when we would approach another tribe, if we belonged to a tribe that, say, had fresh kill, but we didn't have a fire and we didn't have shelter, we were going to approach another tribe for the fire and the shelter, and we might trade. Back then, you had to be pretty quick to determine if that interaction was going to harm or help, because it could get bad quickly. So from there, we as human beings have evolved, and we are continually and constantly assessing conversations, situations, and environments so we can figure out and forecast, how is this interaction going to go for us? That's exactly what your prospects are doing. Here's what makes it hard, though, on Zoom. 55% of what we communicate as human beings is body language. I don't think that's surprising news. 35% is tone, and 10% is words. Most Zoom calls you only see from the shoulders up. We as human beings communicate a lot through how we sit, angles of and how we position our feet, our legs crossed, left, and we communicate a ton with our hands. And you can't see those on Zoom. The brain is used to picking those nuances up. So if you're in a conference room or you're in someone's office, your brain is programmed to look for what the hand gestures are doing, what the body language says, how are they sitting. Your brain is also programmed to pick up eye contact. And we all know on Zoom, eye contact is kind of weird. You really don't know if someone's truly ever looking at you, but your brain is constantly trying to figure that out. Is there eye contact going on? Whereas live, you can tell when someone's looking at you. So again, the brain is in overdrive sometimes, trying to pick up all these nuances on Zoom that they're used to picking up. I'm going to add one more thing to it, Kiley. Your brain also pays attention to the backgrounds. Whatever that background is behind you, your prospect subconsciously and consciously is trying to decipher the information in your background. So the messier and the crazier and the more disheveled your background, it actually becomes a distraction for your prospect as they're trying to listen to your words, because their brain's already in overdrive trying to gather as much as they can about how the interaction with you is going to work.
I was on a meeting a couple weeks ago with somebody who had a book in the background, and for probably far too many seconds, I was trying to figure out what the title of the book was. I was trying to read the name of the book in the background. And then I had another meeting, and the back of their office was a ton of bookshelves and a bunch of posters. And the entire time I'm just like, what the heck is going on back there? I was more intrigued by trying to figure out the decor behind them. So I completely understand where you're coming from with this, and I do it not even really realizing that, hey, I'm really not focused on what this person's saying if I'm worried about what's going on behind them.
Yeah, it's so true, Kiley. I was on a couple calls this week, and one of the individuals, the background was some shelves that looked like they were leaning from right to left. There were stacks of like sloppy papers all through the shelves. And then they had some open boxes stacked behind them. It does give you this impression that this person is a bit disorganized. And this person may not understand that's the impression that they're given, and they may be fully prepared for the conversation. But you pick up these nuances, and it left me impression that this person was going to be poor at follow through, and that I was probably going to have to make sure I paid a ton of attention to what they were committing to because their background said that they were a very disheveled individual. So you'd be surprised how much we pick up via Zoom about someone and how we anticipate their background's going to represent how they're going to handle the interaction or the process with us.
The other thing I've noticed, a lot of times people will type while they're on the Zoom call. And I don't know if people don't realize this, but your box in the Zoom room lights up when it picks up noise. And so every time you type, your box is lit up. So I know exactly where that noise is coming from and I can tell you're typing. Not to mention, I can see your eyes are no longer looking up at the screen a lot of times.
Yeah, Kylie, I would say that's okay though, right? Because they could be typing their notes.
Maybe. But I give the disclaimer, if I'm going to be taking notes on a Zoom call, I let them know, hey, if you hear me typing or see me looking away, I'm just taking notes on all the good stuff that you're telling me so I don't forget anything. I let them know ahead of time.
You know, the other thing on the Zoom call is when you're at home, and I don't know how many of our listeners are now working from home and what percentage of time, but still, you have to understand that's your safe haven. That's your harbor. Psychologically, that is where you go and kick back and you don't feel like you have to be on game for anybody or anything. It is the place where you can let go and just be within your comfort zones. Period. End of story. It's your safe harbor. Now, all of a sudden, you're trying to conduct business at home. Business is about stretching comfort zones. Business is about trying your best to put yourself in the best mental position to bring out your A game, but you're doing it in an environment that has been completely set up and accepted and anticipated as your safe haven, where you can just be who you are and not have to worry about stretching comfort zones, growth, taking on challenges or anything. So be aware of your home environment and where you're having your calls, because your environment is conducive and congruent, maybe that's the better word, to bringing out your A game. If you're in a haphazard environment, you're going to have a difficult time bringing out your A game.
Yeah, I definitely struggled working from home the few months that we were quarantined, and I wasn't getting as dressed up as I normally do for work. I wasn't doing the things that I knew would set me up for success later on in the day. It was kind of just get up and go, start working because things are all very convenient and right there and I don't have to go anywhere. And for me, it was not a motivating situation.
So we talked about the visual component. Let's talk about the mindful component. For our listeners, I know a lot of you know what we do and what we teach. So I know you work hard at trying to remove or at least compartmentalize the wants and the needs and the anticipations and expectations that you have for any prospect or client conversation that you're going to walk into. Very important as a high performer, knowing where your mind is and being self-aware of what your intents and your biases might be as you go into that conversation. Very important. But let's talk about a technique that's really powerful. Some of you write stuff down on a piece of paper and you remind yourself. Great, it's a good start. But we all know sometimes that's not enough. Some of you will do some mantras, and we know that's a good start too, where you might say, hey, I need to let go of all expectations. I need to focus on how and if I can help. I need to make sure that I don't put all this pressure on me and them for some kind of next steps. And those are great reminders. But we all know sometimes they don't always help. What I'm going to suggest here is very straightforward. It's 2 to 10 minutes of breathing. I do it. Kylie, you've done it. Pam does it. I know Tom does it. And I'm always amazed at how much clarity it truly gives me and how it calms me before I get into that conversation. I'll give you an example. I did a virtual presentation or speaking engagement this past week to several hundred people. And before I got on, I was feeling antsy. I was feeling some anxiousness. because I wasn't quite sure how I was going to connect with a certain population of the audience. So I was putting all this pressure on myself to make sure I connected with them. And as I kept putting pressure on myself, I kept feeling my attachment and my scarcity and all that accelerate. So I sat down and for 2 minutes, I just took some deep breaths in, held, and deep breaths out. But for our listeners, here's the key. Visualize and feel the breath going up through your nostrils, into your gut, into your chest, and hold it, and then visualize it coming out. And as it comes out and as you release the breath, visualize yourself releasing your anxieties or whatever's causing you to feel tension and pressure. This is what high performers do, whether it's in sports, whether it's in music. We heard the story this past week. We were talking about surgeons. When they gather their teams together before they go into a heart surgery or a brain surgery or anything like that, they do very mindful exercises to make sure everybody in that operating room is so 100% in that present moment. There's no future thought or past thought.
We hear people say in sports, get your head in the game. It's just being present in that exact moment, not worrying about the past, not worrying about the future, but worrying about right where you are.
In that present moment, you're not fast forwarding to the future, which is this going to go well? Or I hope this goes well? Or what if it doesn't? Because the future is where our fears are created. And being in the present also allows us to avoid the past, which is, man, I've had these meetings before and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, or my last 5 meetings haven't gone well, or I really blew it on my last conversation and man, I hope this time I don't blow it. When we think about the past like that, we're just bringing anxiety and hesitation now into the moment. So that is why it's so important to be in the present. You work so hard for your appointments. You work so hard for these conversations. You have to have a process of truly bringing your mind and your head into that very moment. So you're not thinking about the future and worrying about it or the past and feeling anxiety about it. You're in that moment.
This has been a Breaking Sales Snippet. To hear the rest of the conversation, check out Breaking Sales episode 22, Your Virtual Brand from Home, which is linked in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe so you're the first to know when a new episode drops. Kiley out.